Three, two, one. Hello and welcome back to Kenny the Sports Guys podcast. I'm your host Kenny Severa, and welcome to another edition of Best Talk. Joining the show today is Jack Curry, Yes Network analyst. Mr. Curry is an award-winning sports journalist and New York Times best-selling author. His new book, The 1998 New York Yankees, which is available now, chronicles the 1998 New York Yankees as they set the MLB record 125 wins during their amazing run at the World Series, winning their 24th World Series championship. And Jack Curry was there all the way. Please welcome to the show, Jack Curry. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Kenny, thanks for having me. I appreciate the intro, but I refuse to continue to do this interview if you call me Mr. Curry. You have to call me Jack for the rest of this interview, and then we'll be good friends.
Okay, no problem. I will. Okay, the first question I have for you is, can you tell us a bit about your background in baseball and how you got involved with covering the sport?
Kenny, I'll go back to being a seventh grader in elementary school who asked a teacher, how come we don't have a school newspaper? And fortunately, that teacher said to me, do you want to start one? And I did. And I've known from the time I was about 12 or 13 that I wanted to be a sports journalist. And that was my focus from that moment on. It was tunnel vision. When I was in high school and I was in college, that's all that I focused on. I was fortunate enough that a year out of college, I was hired by the New York Times. I eventually became the Yankees beat writer for 7 seasons. I was also a national baseball writer for the Times. So that's where I started to cover the Yankees and start to become a Major League Baseball reporter. After 22 years at the Times, I left print journalism and moved over to broadcast journalism. And now I'm in my 14th season at Yes. I love what I do. I love to be able to get a chance to analyze baseball. And between my job at the Times and now my job at Yes, Kenny, I really feel as if I've been blessed to have 2 dream jobs, not just one.
Living the dream, man. You always living the dream. So you covered the New York Yankees extensively throughout your career. What do you think sets the Yankees apart from other teams in the league?
Well, I'll go back to those 90s teams and just focus in on them. To win 4 World Series titles in 5 years, Kenny, all these years removed from that, we're now seeing how hard that is to do. No team has repeated as champions since the Yankees did it in 98, 99, and 2000. It's really hard to win a world championship. So I think that those teams that I covered, the 4 out of 5 that I'm talking about, first of all, it has to start with talent. We all want to talk about chemistry and camaraderie, and all that stuff matters. And I write a lot about that in the 98 book. But those were really talented, focused, committed, driven teams who, as I said, when they got to October, they won. You look at current baseball, Kenny, the Los Angeles Dodgers have had the best record of anyone in the majors across the last 10 years. They won one championship, and they won it in 2020, which was the shortened season. It just stresses how much difficulty there is in trying to win it all and get through October. And those Yankee teams in the 90s did it.
Yeah, those Yankee teams in the 90s were something special. And my favorite team was, oddly enough, the 1998 Yankees. I mean, 125 wins. It's what the Padres in the World Series with ease, if I may add. And yeah, it was actually a pretty good team. Actually, one of the best teams ever assembled, I believe. And so the next question.
I agree with you. That's why I wrote the book, and that's why we have the title of the book. I think it was the greatest team ever. And I'm not just saying that from a mountaintop without providing evidence. I think anyone who reads this book will see how thoroughly I examine that topic. I mention other teams. I don't just blindly say the 98 Yankees are the best. I do some comparing and contrasting. And this is the great part about sports and debates, Kenny. Can we actually pick the greatest team of all time? Probably not. Generation to generation, it's hard to compare. But I think if you read this book, you'll come away seeing the strong argument that I present.
Let's talk about this current day New York Yankees. The New York Yankees are struggling to start the season. As of this recording, they are 16-14, last place in the American League East. What do you think is wrong with the Yankees so far this season?
Yeah, they've been beset by injuries, and you have to mention the injuries because that's been a part of what has delayed them. They don't have members of their starting rotation, important members of the rotation. They're missing hitters. But after you talk about the injuries, Kenny, the next sentence has to be, well, how do you overcome that? How do you fix what's going on with your team now? Because everyone has to deal with injuries, and they have a W and an L in the standings. You either win or you lose. Nobody says how
Yep.
many injuries have you had. I think their offense, without some of the players, Stanton, Judge, Bader's back now, and the underperformance. There are some players who haven't performed for them. In their last 20 games, I think in 14 of them, they've scored 3 runs or fewer. Very hard to win baseball games when you do that. But I would say to Yankee fans a couple of things. It's a long season, a really
Yeah,
long
it is.
season. And the Yankees have time to get their players back and make some moves in that division. But they have to play better. And it's
Yeah.
incumbent upon the players that they have now to produce. And I think they have the ability to do that. Let's see if they do that across the coming weeks.
Yeah, I think they will get it together. I mean, obviously, injuries play a huge factor in their struggles. Rodon's gonna be out for the foreseeable future. Judge and Stan is on the IL. Judge has a injury he's attending with, and I believe that the Yankees are actually gonna make the playoffs when it's all said and done.
I thought that at the beginning of the season. I'm not changing my opinion right now. As I said, I think you have to remember how long the season is, and you can't give up on teams in April and May. I can give you examples, recent examples. The Phillies had an awful start last year. I think it was 22-29. They made the
Yep.
World Series. The Washington Nationals a few years back started out 19-31 and won the World Series. So there's a lot of baseball. The Rays are off to a flying start. That's why this weekend series is important for the Yankees. The Yankees have to show up this weekend. They have to show up and say to the Rays, we're still a factor in this whole thing. And they got to win a series. I'm not saying they have to sweep the Rays, Kenny, but they need to take at least 2 out of 3 to sort of say to the Tampa Bay Rays, hey, you're not running away with this. We still have an opportunity to close the gap.
Speaking of Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton, with Aaron Judge potentially missing games and Giancarlo Stanton on the IL, who do you think will step up in the Yankees offense?
Well, when we talk about the injuries, Kenny, we should also talk about who's not injured and who's here. The Yankees' entire infield is essentially intact. I know Donaldson's on the IL, but you could easily say LeMahieu's your starting third baseman. Volpe's playing, Torres is playing, Rizzo is playing. I look at those 4 players who on any given night, they need to produce because the Yankees offense only stretches so far. Last night's win, they got home runs from Calhoun and Bowers, and Calhoun had another good at-bat in the 9th inning. That's wonderful, and when you get that, that's great. But your core key players need to perform, and it's the 4 that I mentioned. And I'll also throw Jose Trevino in there. He had the walk-off hit last night. He's your starting catcher. He's got to produce. So as nice as it is to get some help from the guys lower in the lineup, you need the core guys to produce.
Well said. I think for me, I think Willie Calhoun is actually going to be essential towards this offense because he has experience and he's been hitting the ball well lately, and he could be a key cog in the offense.
I think that's the Yankees' hope. It's interesting that you bring him up. I was at Yankee Stadium last night doing post-game interviews, and I asked Willie Calhoun, when you were in spring training, did you envision that at some point in May, you'd hit back-to-back home runs and back-to-back games for the Yankees, have 2 homers in 2 straight games? And he said, nope, he didn't think that. So it just shows you the evolution of the game. Players can get injured. Guys can come forward. Willie Calhoun has very good plate discipline. Willie Calhoun can hit the ball out of the ballpark, but he's a line drive hitter. He was once a really highly rated prospect. Let's see what he does in the coming weeks and if he can still be someone who contributes for the Yankees.
How will the Yankees finish this year?
I think they're a postseason team. I said at the beginning of the season, I thought they were a 95-plus win team, and they were a postseason team. Injuries have hurt them. Underperformance has hurt them. They're 17-15 right now, but I would make this argument to you, Kenny. Through 32 games, what did you expect them to be? 20-12 would be a really nice start. So they're 17-15. They're a few games off that. with everything that has happened to them. That's not an alibi for them. That's just sort of recognizing the numbers and recognizing that there's still a chance to, I don't even want to say turn the season around. There's still a chance to get the season back on track
Yeah.
to the way I think a lot of people thought they would play.
Oh, it's like we said earlier. It's still early. The Phillies made it to the World Series despite struggling for the first 2 months of the season, and we should see what happens because this team has the potential to not only be a playoff team but also win the World Series as well.
Yeah, and you have to get healthy. You have to get
Yeah,
healthy. You have to get there, and I think that's what the Yankees are trying to figure out right now.
yeah. Let's talk about your new book, the 1998 New York Yankees. What was the inspiration behind the new book?
Well, I did books with David Cohn and Paul O'Neill. The Cohn book obviously focused on pitching, and the O'Neill
Hmm.
book focused on hitting. And in talking to them while working on those books, we talked about dozens of topics, but it resonated with me how when we talked about the 98 Yankees, they spoke about them with such reverence. So I kept it in the back of my mind that maybe I'll try and write a book on the 98 Yankees. This is the 25th anniversary. It seemed like the perfect time to work on this project. I covered that team. I know all of those players. And I felt as if anyone was going to write this book, I should be the person to write this book. And that was my motivation, that I would sit down and start to write about this team and report on this team, and it would bring back all of those memories of following them all throughout 98.
What was your favorite part in covering the 1998 New York Yankees and why?
Well, my mind goes right back to the victorious clubhouse, Kenny, when they won the championship. Being in San Diego, being in that clubhouse, George Steinbrenner was crying, players were spraying champagne. But what I remember is the combination of joy and relief. Because after you've won 114 games in the regular season, you'd better win a World Series title. Because if
Of
not,
course, yeah.
it's a failure. And that's what the Yankees would say. Failure is a strong word. It's a lost opportunity. I'll say that. The Seattle Mariners won 116 games a few years after the Yankees in 2001. Nobody talks about them. You've got to finish the deal. And that's why I
Hmm.
could see how relieved the Yankees were that they did that.
The last question I have for you is, what was your? Sorry. Will there be another 1998 Yankee team in the near future?
Kenny, I think they're the greatest team of all time. So for me to forecast that there'll be another 98 Yankee team in the near future, that would be
Hmm.
quite a prediction from me. I would just say that Yankee fans, as they're watching this 23 team, they should, again, remember that there's a lot of baseball left. There's a lot of enjoyment in watching a young player like Volpe produce and perform, and enjoy what's happening on the field on the days when they are successful. Will there ever be another 98 Yankee team? I'm not sure I could say yes to that. I think this was a team for the ages. They won more games than any team ever won. So I can't sit here right now and say, yes, within the next 10 years, you'll see another team like that. I think that would be quite a bold prediction, and I'm not ready to make it.
Fair point. Just a couple of years ago, the Dodgers, as you previously alluded to, they won the World Series, and that team kind of reminded me of the '98 team. But like you said, they won the World Series during a pandemic-shortened season, and some people might call it a Mickey Mouse championship, but I think that's the only team in that year that kind of closely resembles the 1998 New York Yankees.
Yeah, I don't think any championship, I don't know if, yes, I see what you're saying with that point. I still just go back to what I said earlier about how hard it is to win a title. And the Yankees know
Hmm.
that, having not won one since 2009. They do look at 2017 with an asterisk next to it because
Yep.
of the Astros and what came out after that. But
Hmm.
yeah, there's an urgency for them to try and win again, no doubt about it.
So the last question I have is, where can people find your book, and are you available on social media?
Yeah, my social media is pretty easy to find. It's Jack Curry, yes, on Twitter and Instagram. And my book is available wherever you prefer to buy books. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, support your local bookstores. Kenny, I don't care where they buy it, just as long as they buy it.
Well, that's all the questions I have for you, Jack. Thank you so much for the time, and I hope the Yankees do well this season. And Maybe I'll get you back on the show to discuss their World Series championship or something.
That sounds great, Kenny. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
Well, that's all the questions I have today. I want to thank Jack Curry for the time. You can find this episode on KenTheSportsGuy.com, Ken with 2 N's, and my YouTube channel, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. In addition, head on over to my social media pages on Twitter at Kenny_sports, Instagram at Kenny Sports Guy 1, and TikTok at Kenny Sports Podcast. Until the next episode, see ya, and I hope you stay safe and healthy.